You know the NBA as the home of dazzling crossovers, buzzer beaters, and multi-million-dollar contracts. But behind the bright lights and roaring crowds, there's a darker side to the game, one we rarely talk about. Because not every player's story ends with a Hall of Fame induction or a championship parade. Some take a turn into territory that no athlete ever wants to see: the world of crime. Today, we're counting down the top 6 NBA stars who became criminals. This isn't about technical fouls or trash talk. We're talking about real-life arrests, trials, and convictions. Players whose names once lit up scoreboards, now forever linked to police reports and courtrooms. Some cases are shocking because of the crime itself, others because no one saw it coming. And here's the thing, these aren't all one-off mistakes. For some, it was a moment of madness that changed everything. For others, it was a long spiral that ended in prison bars. You might remember their highlight reels, but after this video, you'll remember something else entirely. From promising rookies to established veterans, from shocking acts of violence to high-profile scandals, this is a list that will change the way you look at these players forever. Let's start at number 6. And believe me, you won't see the number 1 spot coming. Sebastian Telfair. Sebastian Telfair's story is one of the most dramatic falls from grace in NBA history. Coming out of high school in 2004, he was a phenom, the Brooklyn guard who graced the cover of Slam magazine before he'd played a single professional game. Drafted 13th overall by the Portland Trail Blazers, Telfair was supposed to be the next big thing, following in the footsteps of prep-to-pro stars like LeBron James. But his career never quite lived up to the hype. After bouncing around the league with teams like the Celtics, Timberwolves, and Suns, he found himself out of the NBA by 2014. That's when his life started making headlines for the wrong reasons. In June 2017, police in Brooklyn pulled over Telfair for driving with his headlights off. What should have been a minor traffic stop quickly turned serious. Officers found 3 loaded handguns, a semi-automatic rifle, ammunition, and a bulletproof vest in his vehicle. In New York, where gun laws are among the strictest in the country, that's a major felony. At his trial, prosecutors argued that this wasn't an isolated lapse in judgment. Telfair had a prior weapons conviction from 2007, and now, 10 years later, he was back in the same trouble, only worse. In 2019, he was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison for criminal possession of a weapon. For many basketball fans, it was a sobering reminder of how quickly potential can vanish. Telfair went from a nationally celebrated high school prodigy to an inmate in less than 15 years. And as shocking as his story is, it's just the start of this countdown. Because while Telfair's downfall was fueled by poor choices and bad timing, the man at number 5 committed an act so violent it changed 2 lives forever. And one of them was another NBA player. Kermit Washington. If you know the name Kermit Washington, it's probably because of one infamous moment in NBA history, a single punch that nearly killed another player. But his story doesn't end there. Decades after that on-court incident, Washington's name would resurface in headlines for a very different kind of crime. Let's start with the night of December 9th, 1977. Washington was playing for the Los Angeles Lakers in a game against the Houston Rockets. In the middle of a scuffle, Washington turned and threw a punch at Rudy Tomjanovich, hitting him so hard it fractured his skull, broke his jaw, and caused severe facial injuries. Tomjanovich needed emergency surgery and spent months recovering. The incident made Washington one of the most notorious figures in league history, though he continued his NBA career for several more seasons. Fast forward almost 40 years. In 2016, Washington was charged with felony fraud for embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars from a charity he ran. According to federal prosecutors, Washington's foundation claimed to send medical supplies to Africa, but much of the money was allegedly diverted into his own bank account. The scheme also involved laundering funds through other individuals to conceal the theft. In 2018, Washington pleaded guilty to identity theft and filing false tax returns in connection with the charity fraud. The sentence? 6 years in federal prison. For a man who once tried to rebuild his image after the most infamous punch in NBA history, it was a devastating final chapter. Washington's life is a cautionary tale, from NBA All-Star to one of the most infamous moments in sports, and finally to a criminal conviction decades later. His fall wasn't sudden, it was a long, complicated path that kept circling back to controversy. And if you think that's bad, wait until you hear about the man at number 4. Because his actions didn't just end his basketball career, they nearly ended someone's life before it ever reached trial. Mookie Blaylock. Mookie Blaylock was once one of the most respected point guards in the NBA. Known for his defense, quick hands, and leadership, he spent 13 seasons in the league, most notably with the Atlanta Hawks, and even earned an All-Star selection in 1994. He was the kind of player coaches loved, reliable, smart, and tough on both ends of the floor. But after his playing days ended, Blaylock's life took a dark turn. Over the years, he developed a long history of problems behind the wheel, multiple arrests for DUI and a suspended driver's license. Those issues came to a head on May 31st, 2013. That afternoon in Jonesboro, Georgia, Blaylock's SUV crossed the center line and collided head-on with another vehicle. Inside that car was 43-year-old Monica Murphy, who tragically died from her injuries. Blaylock was also badly hurt in the crash, but as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered troubling facts. Not only had his license been suspended, but toxicology tests showed he had a significant level of alcohol in his system. In 2014, Blaylock pleaded guilty to vehicular homicide, DUI, and other charges as part of a plea deal. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with 7 of those to be served behind bars and the remainder on probation. It was a devastating fall for a man who, at one time, was an NBA star with a spotless professional image. Blaylock's story is a harsh reminder that the decisions you make off the court can erase everything you achieved on it. His name will forever be tied to an avoidable tragedy, one that cost an innocent life and destroyed his own freedom. And if you think that's one of the darkest chapters on this list, the man at number 3 takes things even further. His crime shocked the sports world not just for what happened, but for how it happened. Jason Williams. In the late 1990s, Jason Williams was one of the NBA's most charismatic and popular players. As a 6'10" power forward for the New Jersey Nets, he was known for his rebounding, physical play, and big personality. By 1999, he was an all-star, and his career looked set for a long run. But injuries forced him into early retirement in 2000, at just 32 years old. What happened next would overshadow everything he did on the court. On February 14th, 2002, Williams was hosting friends at his mansion in New Jersey. Among them was Costa's Gus Christophe, a 55-year-old limousine driver hired to take Williams' guest to and from a charity event. At some point in the evening, Williams retrieved a shotgun to show to his friends. The gun discharged, and Christophe was struck in the chest, killing him instantly. What followed made the situation worse. Prosecutors alleged that Williams tried to cover up what happened, wiping the gun, moving the body, and instructing his guest to lie to the police. The case dragged on for years, with 2 trials ending in hung juries. Finally, in 2010, Williams pleaded guilty to aggravated assault and admitted to covering up the shooting. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, serving about 18 months before being released. The shooting wasn't Williams' only legal trouble. He also had multiple arrests for driving while intoxicated, and other incidents after his release. Each time, it reinforced the image of a man whose life had spiraled far from his NBA glory days. For basketball fans, Jason Williams' legacy is a painful one. He went from being a beloved figure in the league to someone forever defined by a tragic, avoidable death and the choices he made afterward. His story is a reminder that fame and fortune can't protect you from the consequences of a single, reckless moment. And as tragic as this is, our next player's crimes weren't a single, shocking incident. At number 2, we're looking at a man whose criminal record became so long and disturbing. It ended with him serving a sentence that will likely keep him behind bars for the rest of his life. Eddie Lee Johnson. Eddie Lee, Fast Eddie Johnson, was once known as a dynamic scorer in the NBA. Drafted by the Atlanta Hawks in 1977, he quickly earned a reputation as a talented shooting guard who could light up the scoreboard. Over a 10-year career, he played for the Hawks, Cleveland Cavaliers, and Seattle Supersonics, averaging double figures in points for much of his time in the league. But even during his playing days, trouble was never far away. Johnson struggled with substance abuse, and his off-court behavior often drew more attention than his on-court skills. By the time he left the NBA in 1987, he had already faced multiple arrests, mostly related to drugs. What came next was a downward spiral that shocked even those familiar with his past. Over the next 2 decades, Johnson was arrested over 100 times for a variety of offenses, from burglary and theft to drug possession. But it was his final arrest in 2006 that sealed his fate. In August of that year, Johnson was accused of breaking into a Florida apartment and sexually assaulting an 8-year-old girl. Prosecutors charged him with sexual battery, burglary, and lewd and lascivious molestation. Given his extensive criminal history, Johnson faced a life sentence under Florida's 3 strikes law. In 2008, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. For a man who once had the talent to be an NBA star, it was the ultimate collapse. From professional athlete to one of the most notorious criminals ever to play in the league. Johnson's case is often cited as a cautionary tale about wasted potential and the dangers of never addressing personal demons. His story doesn't have a twist ending or a redemption arc, only a permanent reminder of how far and how fast someone can fall. And yet, believe it or not, there's one name that still tops this list. At number 1, we have a former first-round draft pick whose crime involved a murder case, gang activity, and a prison sentence that left NBA fans stunned. Javaris Crittenton. Javaris Crittenton entered the NBA with all the makings of a success story. Drafted 19th overall by the Los Angeles Lakers in 2007 after one standout season at Georgia Tech, he was a 6-foot 5-point guard with length, athleticism, and plenty of upside. The Lakers saw him as a promising young piece, and he was part of the high-profile trade that sent Pau Gasol to LA, landing Crittenton with the Memphis Grizzlies. But his NBA career never found its footing. He played just 2 seasons, also spending time with the Washington Wizards. It was in Washington where the first major red flag appeared, the infamous locker room gun incident in December 2009. Crittenton and teammate Gilbert Arenas reportedly argued over a gambling debt from a card game, and both men brought guns into the team's locker room. No shots were fired, but the scandal was huge, leading to suspensions for both players and effectively ending Crittenton's NBA career. What happened after basketball was far worse. By 2011, Crittenton's name was tied to gang activity in Atlanta. Police alleged that he was involved with the Crips and had turned to a life of crime. That August, 22-year-old Julian Jones, a mother of 4, was shot and killed in Atlanta in what authorities said was a drive-by shooting. Investigators believed Crittenton was aiming for someone else in retaliation for a robbery, but hit Jones instead. In 2014, facing overwhelming evidence, Crittenton pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. He was sentenced to 23 years in prison. For someone who once stood on an NBA court under the bright lights, it was a shocking and tragic fall. Crittenton's story is the starkest example on this list, a reminder that even the brightest athletic futures can be destroyed by a single catastrophic decision. His transformation from first-round draft pick to convicted felon is one of the most dramatic and saddest in NBA history. From the hardwood to a prison cell, Javaris Crittenton went from chasing championships to serving decades behind bars. And that's why he's number 1. And there it is. 6 men who once had the talent, the spotlight, and the opportunity to live out the dream of millions, only to throw it all away. From Sebastian Telfair's fall from high school prodigy to prison inmate, to Kermit Washington, whose name will always be tied to both the most infamous punch in NBA history and a later federal conviction. From Mookie Blaylock's tragic drunk driving crash to Jason Williams' fatal shotgun incident and cover-up. From Eddie Lee Johnson's decades-long criminal spiral ending in life without parole to Javaris Crittenton's shocking transformation from NBA first-round pick to convicted killer. Each story is different, but they all share one thing: proof that talent alone isn't enough to protect you from the consequences of your choices. The NBA is a stage, but it's also just a chapter in life. And for these men, the next chapters were written in police reports and court records instead of record books and highlight reels. We share these stories not to glorify them, but to remember that fame and fortune don't erase human flaws. They magnify them. And sometimes, the fall from the top can be even more dramatic than the rise. Which of these cases shocked you the most? Were there any names you expected to see that didn't make the list? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your take. This has been Game 7 Stories, where every play, every rivalry, and every moment matters. Even the ones the NBA wishes it could forget. If you want more untold stories from basketball history, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and be ready for the next deep dive into the game beyond the box score.